Hi, everybody. I'm Matt, founder and CEO of LiveSchool, and this is the LiveSchool podcast. Our guest today is Eric Stephenson, assistant principal at Crossroads Middle School. That's over in Fairfield, Ohio. Thanks for being here today. How's it going?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, your school has recorded and recognized students with over 400,000 positive points so far this year. Sounds like you've gotten some great stuff off the ground. Can you tell us a little bit about what that process has been like and what's it like to be a student at your school? What kinds of stuff are they doing with all these points?
Sure. Yeah. So the way that we use it, I think, is the typical way. Is teachers are awarding points for for good behavior or for like good sequences of things that the students are doing, that sort of thing. Obviously, uh, we're issuing demerits for students that have some sort of infraction of some sort. We generally don't use it as our, if we have big disciplinary issues, those are just kind of office referrals. But as far as keeping things in the hands of the teachers, especially, that's what we use it for. It's for that. As far as a student at our school, I would say that we see students kind of responding to it in a generally a good way, especially if there's a negative point. If a teacher has the sound on and issues a negative point and it does the whack whack, all the students kind of like perk up for a second. They're like, oh gosh, she's paying attention. What are we looking at? He's looking at this kind of thing. So I would say that that's kind of their interaction with it. They use their points to buy a whole slew of different things, whether that's, talkies are a big thing.
Mm.
Booth passes at lunch, hat passes, that sort of thing.
What's a booth pass?
So we have in each of our cafeterias, we have two booths. Just it's just like a restaurant booth that the kids can choose. I think it's three of their friends to sit at the booth for the day. I mean, it is nice. It's got a backrest and a padded seat, which is more than you can say for lunch tables.
Yeah, that sounds very nice. Have you found that like more of the tangible rewards are more popular or more of those like experiences, or does it just depend on the student?
I think that the more tangible things are the big things that they're shooting for,
Yep.
and it's really the quick stuff.
Mm,
So if they've got to work for it for a really long time, and I mean we've read that research too, saying
yep.
if a kid has to wait too long, then it's probably
Mm.
not the best system. So we try to keep some of those things low so that kids have some incentive to do things and then kind of get that not instant gratification, but some reward with it.
How often are students able to shop?
They can shop whenever they want. They can.
Oh, okay. So is this like a room in your building that's open, or how does that work?
So I guess when I say tangible, I don't mean like physical objects
Hmm.
as much as I mean like the booth passes, like the hat
Got it.
passes, like the sometimes if there's a bunch of them, they can pull together for like some extra recess time, that sort of thing.
Nice.
Um, does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. So every day they're able to buy that's awesome.
They can purchase anytime they want, and we do have a handful, and we split it with some of our PBIS systems, but we do have like talkies that are in the office, or
Nice.
that's really the big thing that they're shooting for is
Yeah.
talkies or hot Cheetos on occasion.
Oh yeah. So I know you had a really high PBIS ratio, like over 100 to 1 or something like that, in terms of
Yeah,
the amount of positives going out versus the demerits. I mean, I guess it's better than the opposite, right? It's better than having a hundred negatives to every positive. But you actually thought that was not a good thing. Could you just talk through like that thought process and what you all have been doing to kind of try to tighten that up and be more consistent?
sure. So it originally was brought to my attention via like our psych in our building, and she was saying, really, you're looking for like a 3-to-1 ratio, and I was like, oh man, we're not even close to that. We're at, I think the best grade band. We have 6, 7, and 8 here. The best grade
Hmm.
band was, I think, 70 something to 1 or something. And I was like,
Right.
so that
So
was we
too
kind of
positive.
yeah, right. And so what we started thinking through when we started looking at, okay, students are getting points for this, and that's awesome. And I'm so glad, it's a school initiative. I'm so glad that people are using this. However, it seems like early on in a school year, it would make sense for uh, the higher points for the positives. But as the school year kind of trends on, we were seeing the continuation of those points, but kids were getting positive points for stuff that really they should be doing anyway. It's not like a
Was it stuff that they like maybe at the beginning of the year? It was like, okay, we'll give points for that, and then you expect them to kind of learn it, or just stuff you in general just expect them to do?
so I think that the teachers, to their credit, they were trying to set the tone and they were trying
Yep.
to make sure that, hey, we're trying to make sure that they understand what the expectations are and what the rules
Mm.
are and what we're going to be doing every single day.
Yep.
So they get into class on time. It's like
Yep.
that's sure the first couple of weeks if you want to issue some points for that, maybe even a whole class, sure, go for it.
Yep.
But if it's like third quarter and you're issuing positive points for being on time, it's like, yeah, you should probably have figured that out by now. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of the conversation we had, and I had
Got
to
it.
be. It was right around Christmas. I had to be the Grinch and be like, "Hey guys, like we should probably think about how we're using this." I told them about 3-1, and I said, "Hey, it's okay if we're not 3-1. That's totally fine, but maybe like 10-1 and
Right.
not 120-1 kind of thing."
Yeah.
And that has tightened up a little bit. I haven't looked at it. I probably should have looked at it today before this, but um, that has definitely gone down a smidge.
Yeah. And I guess that was a challenge too, because you were trying to find the right balance of like how much should rewards be worth, and maybe it's hard to balance, make it fair for all students when you've got those big differences and huge spikes in positives probably.
Sure, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How has that gone? Do you feel like you're starting to find the right like prices for everything, or what's that process like?
I would say that we're still too high on a lot of
Yep.
stuff.
Yep.
And some of that we really do try to defer to the teachers. They're the ones that are on the ground in the classrooms every day. They know their kids better than we do
Yep.
from an administrative perspective, hopefully.
Yep.
um, but so we try to give the autonomy to say, even we have different teams within different grade bands to say,
Mm.
hey, this is your team's rewards system. Like you guys decide how you're going to use this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So there might be, one team might have chips for 75 points. I don't know.
Yeah.
They might have a booth pass for 25 points. I'm just making these up because I don't remember
Sure.
what they are off the top of my
Sure.
head. But we try to give, like I said, that autonomy.
Mm.
Looking at it, I think that we've realized through time and through some conversation, like, hey, we really should probably lower some of these. But the other tricky thing is it's still a public school and money's always tight in public schools. And so even having the money to give the incentives, it would be really nice to have hundreds and hundreds of dollars that we could say, hey, the points are a little lower and we're going to offer a little more instant, options here. Uh,
Hmm.
but there's kind of the balance that we've kind of tried to figure out there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm guessing your school's pretty big if within a grade level you have, you know, multiple teams that are going, you must be well up pushing 1,000 students or
Yeah, we're a little over 1,100. We're between
okay.
1,100 and 1,200. So
Wow. Yeah,
yeah, just depending on the year, but I think this year we're around 1150 or something like
got
that.
it. So you're trying to give within grades, you're trying to give those teams a little bit of flexibility and autonomy, but then you also need the overall system to kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
balance out. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's, I mean, like we said, it's a school initiative. We're trying to do this from a whole building perspective. And
Yep.
I use it at recess. If I see a kid doing something,
Awesome.
hey, this is above and beyond. You're like killing it. You're helping somebody. It's fun to be able to do that. I don't get to issue those as much as I would like, obviously, but yeah, I would say too the sixth grade teachers do a really great job of issuing points, both positive and negative. They do a really good
Yeah.
job. The further up we get, so we're a 6, 7, 8 building.
Hmm.
Seventh graders teachers are like they're okay at it. They don't issue quite as many, and then the eighth grade teachers still less than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's I think that students are getting older, the
Hmm.
expectations are
Yeah.
changing, and so there's probably less usage of that. And so I get that, but we still try to encourage like, hey,
Yeah.
make sure you're hitting these, and we want to make sure that that this is a positive system because really it's a thing that our district has access to. It's not just our building.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a pretty common challenge, especially getting up into like eighth grade where students are just a little harder to reach, a little hard to get them really excited and just kind of find what it is that they're most excited about, if that makes sense. What are some of the like positive trends that you've seen this year? Are you seeing progress in areas you like? Are there areas you're still working on?
Yeah, I would say that this will on occasion like fuel our PBIS numbers and our students that we're looking for that. So if we see a student that is kind of habitually in the, we do a 5 or more negative points in a week. If you hit 5 or more negative points in a week, that's like counts as one. And
Mm,
so you get week 1, that's a consequence. Week 2 is a consequence. And so as that continues to drive up, unfortunately, if we have students that continue to have higher point values in the negative category over 5, that kind of fuels our PBIS discussion and our MTSS discussion for those students. So I would say that
yep.
for me as an office administration person, like that is an incredible tool to help us to have the teachers inform us in a way that they might not have to think back through on a kid. We can just see, oh yeah, they have been hit a couple of times in math and then a few times in language arts, and it seems like they're having a really hard time here. And so that's been able to help us tailor both classroom settings as well as extra incentives.
Yep.
So when we use it for the MTSS purposes, that's a check in, check out system. So it's like a physical live school pass at that point that we
Mm,
have kids take period to period. And then they use those for bigger incentives, like, we'll take them to Canes or they'll get lunch from McDonald's or, whatever it is that they
hmm.
decide they're looking for.
So that's almost like, I guess, a kind of a tier two support that
Exactly.
you add in. So if students are getting a lot of negatives, you almost give them more opportunity to get more recognition, both tangible and from teachers.
And I'm hoping that it's not just us, but in what we have found is tier 2 is the hardest thing
Mm,
to
yep.
incentivize and to, like, there's not as many, at least to my knowledge, there's not as many interventions at a tier 2 that are feasible, practical for us, it seems.
Yeah, I think that's also a pretty common challenge. I think check and check out is one that's really, really common. It sounds like you're running sort
Yeah.
of a version of that.
Hmm.
Can you talk just a little bit more? So you've really, come up with a consistent accountability system for students. So there's these five, it sounds like five kind of negatives, and that adds up to some kind of consequence. And you've actually built like a ladder of consequences, and that's based on all teachers that a student might see. So it's not the kind of situation where maybe, a lot of small behaviors in a lot of classes. It's more of something that teachers are using a shared system. Is that right?
Yeah. So what we've created, and we actually stole this from another school that we saw they were doing a similar thing. In years past, we've reset, like at the quarter, we've reset the discipline tiers
Hmm.
as far as the weeks go. This is the first year we have not done that.
Hmm.
And so we have this building wide. We sent it out to parents in a I think an email or a remind early on in the year to make sure everyone was aware. We went over it in our advisories, but it's essentially this matrix that just says week 1, here's the consequence. Week 2, here's the consequence. Week 3, here's the consequence, and it goes all the way up from, I think the first one I'm looking at is a lunch and recess detention, and that's our tier 1s, and then it goes all the way up for a recommendation for expulsion. And so,
Yeah.
hopefully we don't get there, but that's like
Yeah.
if we talk about that chronic misbehavior piece of things, like, I mean, that is a reason that we do see some of these
Yeah.
students in the office. But that is also, and this has been, I think personally huge for us. Our cutoff is week 4. After week 4, there's a parent meeting, and so we invite the parents into the building and we say,
Hmm.
"Hey, here are some of the trends that we've seen. This is where a kid is having some trouble. This is where we notice. What do you guys have at home that has worked for you? We really try to partner with the families
Yeah.
so that we can best serve the students. And this is our way of doing that. LiveSchool is kind of how we are able to account for that and to keep us honest and accountable to say,
Yeah.
okay, this kid's here, and our teachers track that based off of their advisory students. So if you check your advisory kids you've got maybe 15 kids in your advisory, you check your advisory kids every week and see where they are and if they've hit 5 or more,
Hmm.
and if they have, then you are the one who issues the referral to the office, and then we kind of track from there.
Yeah. Got it. What have you been observing just kind of post COVID when it comes to behavior? Have you observed any trends or differences and compared to a couple of years ago?
I think we're the norm in it. It seems like a lot of times we're teaching kind of those rudimentary behaviors that we're trying to get kids to know. And to be honest, I would rather they learn them in a middle school. I was just talking with a parent who, their student got in some discipline, and I was able to say to her, just saying, "Hey, I know that this is not good news, and I know that no one likes to see my phone number pop up on their caller ID for the most
Yeah.
part. Um, but I would so much rather us have this conversation and us go through this together and learn these skills that I thought they would have learned already, than they learn it in high school or
Yeah.
beyond.
Yeah.
So I would say that we've seen a lot of that, but I think that that's kind of the norm right now that we've been trying to work through
Like
with.
some catching up, maybe some things that they would have had the opportunity to learn and experiment a little bit and see, develop. Yeah.
And I think some of that honestly is the social interaction piece of things, and
Yeah.
there was a chunk of time when kids were not with kids, and not seeing behaviors modeled and being recognized for that, and so they didn't
Yeah, they
quite
don't
have
know.
the
Yeah.
skill. Yeah, so
Yeah.
and so you
Yeah.
can't blame them for that. I'm the same way
Yeah.
sometimes. So
Any advice that you would have for other administrators who are just trying to kind of create a more consistent behavior management plan, have that right positive emphasis, but also consistency? Anything you've been learning along the way that, if you could go back and talk to yourself a year or two or three ago that you said, hey, here's a couple shortcuts or things to consider?
sure. Yeah, I would say that for us, the matrix was very, very helpful,
Mm,
both from an
yep.
administrative, from a teacher, from a student perspective. It's
Yep.
just because that takes all the emotion out of it. That takes, it's not, I'm not trying to serve somebody with a consequence. I'm
Right.
saying, hey, here is your behavior. And because of your behavior, this is the consequence to that action.
Yep.
Um, and that has made it so much more transparent for teachers to be able to
Mm,
see, hey, they're at week 7, that's this consequence. But also to be able to sit down with students and have conversations and be like, hey, you're at week 10 right now, and week 11 is a day of out of school suspension. That's coming, and if that happens, that will be your consequence. And so to
yeah.
be able to have those straightforward conversations with students, I think um, makes it so that we're all on the same page and that we're all you know clear and
Yep.
transparent with each other. I would say too that the same thing I mean, I'm talking more on the negative piece of that, but I should say on the positive side, I would say really teaming with your psychs, um, your counselors, your especially intervention specialists, and saying, "Hey, are our point values appropriate for our prizes?" That's a big one. The other thing I would say is, hey, should we have different thresholds for students who might be having a really hard time staying under
Mm,
5?
yep.
Because we have some kids that they're hitting 15 a week, and if they have a week that they're at 6 or they're at 7, and it's like, man, that was a good week for them. Maybe
Mm,
their points should be adjusted, and I think that that's
yeah.
something we will continue to learn from and talk through. And those are all team decisions where we have to sit down and say, hey, this is what's best for this kid. I think we should up this kid's to eight demerits is going to be
Yeah.
his off point. So I think that that's something that we missed early on, and we're starting to trend in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, it's really cool to hear how you're able to use that demerit data actually to help think about what extra positive supports a student might need. It sounds like you're trying to really keep the balance, as you go, which is awesome. Um, I've one bigger picture question. I love to ask people this question. Just kind of the debate between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So you got your people who are very focused on intrinsic, and we all have that desire to grow and become better. And then extrinsic is more people wanting to be recognized and rewarded. I'm just curious, having run the system and working with all your staff, what are you kind of seeing in terms of what your students need, what your hopes are, and does your staff get into any, I guess, little debates about that?
I think everybody all the time wants to be recognized.
Mm,
That's and that's I think we could sit and we could say that about students, but in reality, like, I like recognition. That's the biggest conversation I have with my wife all the time is like, hey, can you just recognize the things that I'm doing? And I don't do a good job of that.
Totally.
So I think that that's something that uh, that is always the win for us is if we can point something out, even if it's just something as simple as in a classroom, like, hey, Matt, you're doing a really great job and exactly what I want you to be doing right now.
Yeah.
Like, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That is just something that is so easy and simple. Hey, Mike, that's something that's so easy and so simple and so quick,
Yeah.
but it makes such a difference,
Yeah.
especially to a kid that might be, um, one of your harder ones to wrangle.
Yeah. Awesome.
But I mean, I can see the advantages. I think that as you get older, the intrinsic piece of things,
Yeah. Becomes more important.
it becomes more important. But I would say you can't go too long without recognizing people or their whether that's a student, whether that's a kindergartner or that's a somebody that's in their doctoral program. I don't know. Like it could
Yeah.
be in all of those. If you don't recognize people at any point, I think you're going to lose them, and that's going to push towards culture. That's going to push towards so many other things that have a positive or potential negative effect on your building.
That's awesome. Well, in that spirit, hats off to you, Eric, and to your team for what you all are doing. It's really awesome. You can tell you're putting in a lot of hard work. So I'm sure your kids share that appreciation every day, but just in
Well,
case
thank you.
they are
Yeah,
not.
thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, not always, but sometimes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Matt.